Well, in this final recording, I would now like to invite us to start reflecting on how organizations can hinder or support social work practice. So I'll talk briefly about my own experience, of course, working in different organizations and practice context. But also, I will invite you to start reflecting as well on your own experience. And definitely, there will be a Padlet here where we get to appreciate all these diversity of experiences. Organizations can indeed support or hinder practice. And I don't want to put this as a binary, like some organizations support practice and others hinder practice. It's not one or the other. If you look at how different organizations operate, including maybe where you are working or doing your placement, you'll realize that there is a whole sorts of arrangements and organizational constraints which in many ways support your practice, but others in some ways hinder your practice. And if I can think of something here quickly as I started my own practice, really, started really this very important practice with, women who were victims of sexual and gender-based violence. And the program was being funded by the European Union and really been working with these lovely counselors. But the biggest complaint we had was that the program at some point didn't really reach the outcomes we wanted. And part of that was because the funding just was over. And, what it takes to really do counseling in those complex situations, you build rapport and, all of the other stages you keep building with the clients. So you realize you've started something amazing and you are already getting some satisfaction with the outcomes you are achieving, but then at some point you are simply obliged to stop, maybe even before you conclude the intervention. And that's one way at which we can look at this. And it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do maybe even with the organization you are working in, but it is, again, an organizational thing. The fact that we depend on external funding and funding come with specific requirements and constraints. And, that's just one of the examples I can quickly think of how organizations get to affect practice. So organizations really are complex ecosystems where supportive and constraining factors coexists. And even in organizations which people end up hating because they feel like they are not giving much, there can still be a few factors you look at and you are like, okay, yeah, I understand this didn't go well, but maybe X, Y, Z factors were helpful in my practice. So what I'm trying to say here is that organizations can indeed support practice. And again, if I can think quickly about my own experience, I realized that in many cases, organizations which are supportive tend to have clear policies. So as a worker, you get to understand what are your constraints, what are you allowed, what are you not allowed to do. They tend to be consistent guidelines and access to quality supervision and cohesive teams that strengthen reflexive, ethical, and sustainable work. Now, again, that's just one way of looking at it. You might have a few other factors you wanted to contribute here. And definitely you will have a Padlet here where you will be reflecting on these factors which hinder or which support practice. And it doesn't have to do with your own placement experience. It can be a previous experience. It can be, your own experience of working in different sorts of organizational arrangements. Organizations can also hinder practice. I've just given an example of one way an organization hindered my own practice, but also there can be other ways of looking at it when organizations have rigid system which prioritize outputs over relationships. And again, this can be linked to funding systems. We have funding for a few activities, not everything. And I've had already, or it's been common for me to see social workers complaining like, oh, I wanted to do this with my client. I wanted to involve this. I wanted to, get this done in this way, and it would be producing X outcome, but simply they can't do it because of resource constraints. And of course, all these definitely may create specific challenges in the way you engage with diverse organizations. So how can organizations support practice? As I started saying, having clear policies and guidelines that gets to make people feel safe, not only the service users, but even the practitioners. And that definitely provides clear structures of what is expected from you as a worker and what is not expected from you. Supervision is an important part. And if you are experiencing some supervision wherever you are doing your placement, please try to make the most out of that. But also team functioning. Now, team functioning is an important one because it can sometimes come with its own challenges. If you are in a team which is not functioning well, that can really be stressful, and it can end up really being even toxic for your own health and mental health. But definitely, if teams are functioning well, multidisciplinary, collaborative, and all of the other qualities of good teams, definitely that can make a difference in your work. And information systems and organizational cultures, all those definitely get to influence daily work with alignment to the system in which we are working. Now, there are also many ways in which organizations can hinder practice. Performance-driven systems and the focus on quantifiable key performance indicators, when performance is, and sometimes performance is even measured on, specific measures, specific standards, which might be questioned at times, and that can end up in itself definitely being counterproductive for the workers. The resource shortage, as I started saying, and organizational changes, such as shift in policies and restructuring, which may sometimes conflict with the values of social work and causing in itself ethical dilemmas. So there is here an important role of advocacy. As a practitioner, I believe many of the things you'll be doing will have to do with advocacy, not only advocating for your clients directly, but advocating for conditions which allow you really to make a difference in their life. And some of these are things you can, or you are already negotiating with the organizations where you work. So why is all this important to know, especially this knowledge that organizations can at times hinder practice or support practice? I intentionally termed this the goodwill paradox. And it's, again, a concept really just coming from me out of my own observation that when we are new workers, when we come in a new workplace, we tend to have really a lot of goodwill. We really want to make things work for everyone. We really want to be the best possible workers. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that goodwill alone might not be that effective when it comes to navigating the complexities and challenges of just belonging to an organization. Remember that we rely on organizations for resources, for legitimacy of our work, and for the structural conditions that shape how effectively we end up becoming in supporting the clients we work with. That's very powerful. And I think this point is very much repeated in the core reading for this week. So even with all the goodwill we come with, if the organization, for example, lacks funding, as in the example I just gave before, then that's clearly a constraint to the practice. We might have all the goodwill, but definitely that won't solve that specific problem. Organizational structures and complex bureaucratic systems also shape practice, as I said. And here again, goodwill alone isn't enough to challenge some of the ethical decision making and the type of organizational constraint we really come across while working in human service agencies. So organizations are really complex bureaucratic systems. They come with specific norms, they come with specific cultures. In week 3, we shall be talking about workplace culture. We shall see again how this in itself can be an important part of the work we do, grappling with, diverse work cultures wherever we are working. And this definitely takes me to the last point, that organizational competency is an important part of working in human service organizations. This is where we started, and this is maybe where we are ending. But we are not really just in organizations to practice social work. We practice social work, that's the professional aspect of things, but we need to keep developing organizational skills in analyzing the organizations, understanding what's going on in an organization, understanding the work cultures, understanding what people value in where I work, understanding what matters not only to my clients, but even to the colleagues. Because whatever I try to do with my clients, if the colleagues are not supportive to that, then I'm not really a good worker, or I might face challenges in the way I do my work. So yeah, this is really the point I wanted to make, and reminding you how all these things we are discussing definitely have implications for the practice. The bureaucratic demands get to shape frontline practice. As social workers, we get to navigate a dual organizational role as helpers of the people we work with, but also as official, but even as, people who work with other people and who are managed by other people at times, and in many cases. And we are kind of negotiating that space. And that in itself, navigating those dynamics is an important skill you need to start developing. And of course, system linkage and coordination are again central to our practice. And that practice, frontline practice, relies strongly on organizations. And unless we really understand that, then we are missing an important part of our practice. Thank you very much, and see you very soon.